announcing a comprehensive, coordinated, and multi-agency initiative to ensure that seafood from the Gulf of Mexico is safe to eat. Now, I had some of that seafood for lunch, and it was delicious. So let me be clear, seafood from the Gulf today is safe to eat.
To protect consumers from seafood that might have been contaminated by the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, state and federal agencies have closed suspect waters to harvesting. As an added level of protection, field inspectors have been trained to detect the smell of tainted seafood. The average person can identify oil contamination of about 10 parts per million with a simple bunny sniff. A highly trained inspector can smell the aroma of oil at levels as low as 5 parts per million. 10 parts per million of contamination is about equal to a single drop of oil in 1 gallon of water. Seafood to be screened is kept in a glass container with a glass cover to concentrate any volatile compounds that may be present. Inspectors take a whiff of watermelon, cucumber, or canned corn to cleanse the palate just before lifting the lid on the seafood and inhaling. Using this procedure, trace amounts of oil are easily detected. These and other precautions help ensure the seafood making it to market is safe to eat.
Concern is the impact of that oil that's still there. I mean, what is your concern about it?
Well, my concern is obviously the oil that is down below the surface that's basically a bull on a loose. You have a bunch of fish and a bunch of crustaceans that spawn this year. You have embryos, you have juvenile, and you have larvae of speckled trout, of redfish, of crabs, of shrimp, of a lot of different species, marine species that aren't large enough to control their own destination, so they flow with the currents as well as the oil is below the surface. They come in contact with each other. Now we have a variety of marine life that has a good chance of not surviving or will become a fatal statistic. Now, what happens 2 or 3 years down the road from now when we're trying to catch our adult speckled trout or our adult redfish or our adult shrimp and different things like this that aren't spawning? We can go out and catch fish right now. I don't think that's an argument, but 2 or 3 years down the road, I think we're going to have the potential for serious problems.
Mm-hmm. If you don't have recruitment back out into the wild, it's going to affect your future crops. Mm-hmm. It's just the way it works.
After the BP disaster is what I call it, it went to nothing. The fishing dropped off. I couldn't find any fish on my wrecks, nothing. I had a diver go down on one of my wrecks, and he said everything is dead. Barnacles, seagrasses, all dead. That's a dead wreck. It's not going to come back.
And what about the dispersants? I mean, some people are concerned that the dispersants could be causing damage to the larval and the juvenile fish.
Oh, the indication is that, but BP and our own government says no.
I have a very strong problem with the dispersant because from by the EPA, Lisa Jackson, who's director of it, fired off a memorandum, a letter to BP after about 4 weeks into this disaster, demanding them to quit using Corexit 9500 because of the chemicals contained within the Corexit 9500, because of how toxic they are. BP in turn sends a letter back to them saying, we're going to continue to use it.
And they kept using it.
And they kept using it everywhere else, too, right? No, they did more than use it. They saturated the Gulf with it on top of the oil. I have a serious problem with that.
Well, I mean, do you think it could affect the seafood, the safety of the seafood? I think a lot of people are concerned about that.
I don't have my expertise knowledge. I'm not a biologist. I can't tell you whether it's been damaged. So I think common sense is that we have a tremendous amount of chemicals that have been placed into the Gulf of Mexico, placed into the breeding grounds, has obviously impacted certain parts of our estuaries. So to say that there is not a problem, I think is unfair. I think what we have, we don't have the technical answers to the questions that we need, such as, do we have problems with certain seafood? And they're not giving us those answers. They're just saying that they have things, that things are okay. And what is this? They started off with a sniff test. I mean, I have a problem with sniff testing hydrocarbons on certain fish and certain shellfish. I mean, and that's done by our federal government. We need the answers to what the potential problem is with the chemicals that were contained with the Corexit 9500, and to see exactly what the potential long future. Right now, you can go to beaches along Empire, you can go beaches along South and Southwest Pass. Fiddler crabs are just dying left and right because they've come in contact with the oil. A lot of the marine fishes eat the small hermit crabs and the different fiddler crabs. If they're being contaminated, I know that the potential is, I'm not saying it's a complete black cloud, but we got to have these questions answered.
After the largest oil spill in U.S. history, the Gulf of Mexico is still seeing fish that are sick, and researchers are trying to figure out exactly why. CBS News correspondent Debbie Turner-Bell went there to talk to scientists and the fishermen.
Lucky Russell is convinced his days as a commercial fisherman are numbered.
I don't think we'll be fishing in 5 years, my opinion.
He, like many others that fish the Gulf waters, have started catching fish with sores, fin rots, and infection at a greater frequency than ever before.
Every one of them's worried. Everybody's worried.
Here's a good example of what these fish look like when they first come out of the water.
Dr. Jim Cowan, professor of oceanography at Louisiana State University, has analyzed many of these diseased fish.
When one of these things comes on deck, it's sort of horrifying. I mean, they're, these large dark lesions and eroded fins and areas on the body where the scales have been removed. And I imagine I've seen 30 or 40,000 red snapper in my career, and I've never seen anything like this at all, ever.
Cowan can't say with certainty the cause of these lesions.
We think from chronic exposure to some environmental stressor, and I think the likely assumption that it has something to do with the spill is there.
But the 200 million gallons of crude spilled from the Deepwater Horizon last year is at the top of the list, because the highest rate of sick fish are being found in the areas of the Gulf that were the most affected by the oil.
This whole issue seems to be centered between Galveston and Panama City or Destin. In fact, almost 50% of the red snapper that we caught on some of these reefs had these secondary infections.
A new study says that the BP oil disaster not only wiped out potentially millions of fish, but also created deformities and genetic defects in others. 10 News reporter Eric Glasser is covering Pinellas County and shows us how these conclusions were reached with the help of researchers from right here in the Bay Area.
Steve Morosky, a USF marine biologist, calls it significant. A new study suggesting that the BP oil spill not only killed developing fish, but may have caused heart problems and other deformities that could affect fish populations in the future. Scientists say they replicated the water and oil mixture created by the Deepwater Horizon disaster using samples taken by ships like USF's Weatherbird. They then bred fish including tuna and amberjack, documenting detrimental distortions to the eyes, hearts, and body shape of those fish. You know, these hearts are still in the development stage, and so any kind of pollution can be problematic for them.
And we are back tonight in part 2 of our series, The Gulf Today, 5 years after the spill. I met with residents who showed me what they see as the ongoing environmental issues in the region. Dean Blanchard, one of the country's largest shrimp buyers, shows us firsthand how Gulf shrimp are faring in the wake of the spill.
What is it like here now? There's no shrimp?
Very little, very little. We're probably doing about 30% of what we did before.
What about the quality of the shrimp?
On the inside waters, we're still having mutilated shrimp with no eyes, shrimp with sores on them. On the outside, it's getting a little bit better. See this hole right here? That's not normal. That's all going into the heads. But that's a sore he's got right here. That's not normal.
That's a sore, and that's not normal, right there.
This whole shell fell off right here. This should be shell going all the way to the bottom. That's a cancer right here you got.
That's a cancer right there.
Yeah.
And you can tell by the color of the shell.
The shell's gone.
The shell's gone?
Yeah, you feel it? Feel it right here? Just eat that shell up. See the shell right here?
Yeah.
Just eat it up.
Now what will you do with that?
See on this side, you got shell all over.
What will you do with that?
We don't eat the heads, but that's where most of the stuff's at.
So you just take them off and you're going to consume that?
Yeah. The government says it's all right to eat.
The government says it's okay.
If you can't believe the government, who can you believe, eh? Come on.
What we're looking at are shrimp that were harvested in the Gulf of Mexico, in the area that was impacted by the BP Deepwater Horizon disaster now over 2 years ago. And here is a whole parcel of shrimp that were collected within this week in November. So this is what the fishermen's catches look like now in the Gulf. And what we have here is a bunch of very sick shrimp. Looking at some of these, what you notice is this blackened area through here. All this black is oil. That's what all this is compared to this, how clear and orange brown this is. And here, I'll just drag this guy over. I mean, you can see that this is all blackened and tumors. This is where the oil is. It's in the gut and it's in the lungs. There are other abnormalities. This is a misshapen head, sort of the bigger head, no neck there. These shrimp, there are eyes on most of these shrimp. However, these two in particular, no eyes and no even eye sockets. Oh, there it is. The eyes should be right here. And they should be little black dots, you know? I have never seen this happen after an oil spill. These mutated wildlife like this. Death, yes. Loss of numbers in a population where the populations crash, yes. But tumors, actually, yes. But not what I'm thinking of as mutated wildlife here. No eyes, no eye sockets, these other deformities. I believe this was because of the dispersant. Extraordinary spraying of just mass quantities of dispersant at the surface, at the subsurface, day after day for months. And this is, again, not uncommon with shrimp in the Gulf these days. I'd like to bring in a normal looking shrimp so you have some comparison here. You can see where the eyes are. You also see the gut region is this beautiful orangey brown color. No tumors. This is a healthy shrimp. This one as well, with the segments of the body, it's really hard to tell the segments apart versus some of these ones that have been in oils. You'll see this darkened ring here. Now, the significance of this is that if you were buying shrimp in a market, mostly they come with just the tails, right? So you'd just be getting this portion on back. You wouldn't be seeing the gut. You wouldn't be seeing the tumors. You wouldn't be seeing the ones with missing eyes. You would think you're eating a healthy shrimp. But would it really pass FDA inspection if, you could see the head as well? Yeah, so let's take a little bit closer look at these two. And here you can clearly see the discoloration on the side, the tumor on this one, and the no eyes on this one. And this little guy this one has eyes and no visible oil in its carapace. And then if you look at the underside of these two, you'll see the problem continues in the shrimp with that showing no visible oil. This is all clean here, clean looking, and in the one with oil and the tumor, it's quite darkened and blackened. And again, in other shrimp that have been tested, this has been found to be BP's oil. What this, the sample shows me is that it's a sick ecosystem. The poison is still in the ocean. The poison is still in the habitat that these shrimp utilize, which is pretty much everything. They're down in the mud, in the near shore for a part of their lives. They're out in the shallow ocean, the deep ocean for part of their lives. So the habitat where they live is still oiled, and the shrimp, as indicators of this ecosystem, are picking this up and processing it, as is everything in the ecosystem, in the Gulf of Mexico ecosystem that's coming into contact with this. The turtles, the shrimp, the fish, the birds, the dolphins, the porpoise, the whales, everything is still being exposed to BP oil plus the toxic dispersants. But this oil is not going to go away clearly for a while. It's down in the mud. The bacteria are not able to process it quickly. We're looking at a story that's going to be evolving over the next, probably decade or more.
only shrimp. The oyster industry has been dramatically affected.
For us, what's happened is our bay has really died off in the last 3 years. Our oyster beds have died for some reason. Whether it's to do with the oil spill, some say dispersants were the problem. The lack of fresh water was some of the problem. Never seen the oyster beds in Apalachicola go down like they have. And
in all the years you've been working?
In all the years I've never seen it. We're one of the biggest buyers of oysters in the county from the bay, and we usually get 200 to 300 bags a day, and now we get about 50.
And how about the quality of the oysters?
Well, the quality's still pretty good. They were just a lot of, because they reproduce them, they're small. And we've had a problem with a lot of them being small. And down on the west end of the bay, oysters usually grow a little bigger down there, and all those oysters have died. A friend of mine owns some oyster house down on that side, and he has nothing.
The oysters that he used to dredge up and harvest is no longer there, and he believes that over 90% is gone.
The Louisiana Gulf Coast, one of the nation's leading oyster producers, has fallen on hard times.
We've never seen it before like this.
Third-generation fisherman Randy Slavich nets empty oyster shells in the usually bountiful Lake Machias. Most concerning is the lack of new oyster larvae.
It's not coming back on the shells that are left down there on the ground. Since the spill.
BP maintains the spill was not a factor, citing reports that no oil was detected on oyster beds.
The CMR learned today that 3 out of 4 reefs in the Mississippi Sound show very low oyster counts, and some fishermen told the commissioners instead of opening up the reefs to dredging, they should devote their time to saving the oyster industry.
How do you feel about the season being open? Have you done enough studying, sir? I can't hear you. No? Well, I have.
Every fisherman who stood before the Commission on Marine Resources spoke out against opening the oyster season.
I don't want it open, and no fisherman that I know of wants it open for that, not for 5 sacks. I mean, it's ridiculous, really.
We really need to leave these reefs alone. I haven't run into anyone that wants it open. Everybody was pretty much of the same opinion that there are just too few oysters that survive, and they need to be left alone to breed.
An extensive sampling by the DMR of 4 major oyster reefs backed up the fishermen's claims that there are lower oyster counts this year compared to last year.
I would say, maybe 15 or 20 recent dead that we had found in there.
It's spotty around the reefs. What you saw today was, in some 1 minute dredge pulls, we got no oysters whatsoever. No live oysters, no dead oysters, no oysters. Other tows, we had very high mortalities.
DMR Director Dr. Bill Walker told the fishermen the reefs will remain closed for now, and the fate of the oyster season will be taken up at next month's CMR meeting.
I hope that people will not forget this and will try to stay current on what's happening in the Gulf of Mexico.